Hey there, friend. You ever feel frustrated with those people that live in your house? You know, the ones you gave birth to? Understanding our kids and what's driving some of those behaviors and their responses and interactions with the world can make a parent want to pull their hair out. I'm Jill, and I'm the Mentor Mom. And today, I'm going to help you demystify some of the things that are driving your child by talking about temperament. Let's get to it. So why talk about temperament? Well, I personally believe that our job as a parent is to help our children be prepared to hit the door at 18 and be able to handle anything out in the world. And in order for us to do that, we really have to understand how our kids tick, right? We can't expect them to do what we want them to do the way we want them to do that because they have free will and they're individual and they're unique. A part of that uniqueness is their temperament. So, what is temperament? Temperament can be defined as a grouping of inborn traits that determine a child's unique behavioral style and ultimately impacts the way that they interact with the world. So, having said that, you can see why understanding that as a parent can really help us to make sure that the strategies and the supports that we're providing for our kids to help prepare them for life are tailored to how they learn and respond best. Chess and Thomas started doing research on temperament and personality of young children back in the 60s. And as a result of their research, they came up with 9 different temperament traits, and we're going to go over those real briefly today. The first trait is activity, and that one's pretty straightforward, right? Activity. Is your child busy and active? Is your child relatively slow moving and slightly lethargic, or are they somewhere in between? So activity is trait number 1. I should add that as we talk about these different traits, I kind of like to think of them as being a continuum. You know, there are going to be some kids that are way up here at the high end of that particular trait, and there are going to be some kids that are down at the low end, and the majority are going to fall somewhere in the middle. So keep that in mind as we continue our discussion. The next trait is rhythmicity, and this has to do with regularity. How regular is your child with their eating habits or their sleeping habits? Some kids run like clockwork with their rhythmicity, and other kids are just kind of all over the place and don't seem to have a whole lot of a pattern to what it is that they do during the day. And interestingly, speaking as a mom myself, one thing that I saw from my kids is that there were certain things that they were very rhythmic about, going in eating and with their sleep patterns, and maybe there were other things that they really were kind of all over the chart with. So I think personally that it kind of depends too on what particular area you're talking about when we're looking at rhythmicity. The next trait is approach and withdrawal. How does your child look at new situations or meeting new people or handle problems? Do they do it with gusto and energy and confidence? Are they a little bit slower or do they withdraw when they're hit with difficulty or new situations? So that would be the next trait of approach and withdrawal. The next trait would be intensity. How does your child react to situations? Or do they react in a positive way? Do they react in a negative way? Do they react calmly? Do they react with strong emotions? Intensity. Another trait would be adaptability. How does your child adjust to change or transitions? This is a tough one for a lot of young kids. So looking at their adaptability to new situations. Moving on to mood, does your child often express a negative outlook or are they generally positive? Are they shifting their moods frequently? Are they relatively calm and happy? Or are they really, really intense and frustrated a lot of the time? Mood. Next up, persistence and attention span. Does your child stick to it when they're working on a problem or playing with a toy, such as stacking blocks? Will they continue to try over and over until they achieve what it is that they're trying to achieve with stacking those blocks? Or do they give up after a couple of times of the tower falling over? Do they have the ability to stick with something for a significant amount of time? Having said that, we are talking about young kids, so we have to keep that in mind when talking about attention span. But does their mind wander? Do they have difficulty? Are they distracted easily? Persistence and attention span. Related to that is distractibility. Can they stick with something, or do they easily get distracted by sounds, noise, other sensory inputs? And then finally, we have sensory threshold. Do they have a high or a low tolerance for sensory input like lights, sounds, and movement? So Chess and Thomas took these results and took all of these traits and combined them to form 3 basic types of temperament. And they found at the time that about 65% of kids fell into these 3 basic types. The other 35% were more of a combination and variety of the traits. So let's talk about these 3 temperament types. The first being the easy or flexible child. So these are a parent's dream. I don't know who gets all of these kids, but these are the kids who are generally happy and calm. They have pretty regular sleep and eating patterns. They don't get upset very easily, and they are very adaptable. The next temperament type is the active or feisty child, which, interestingly enough, at least at the time of this research, comprised about 10% of the kids, which I find really hard to believe nowadays. I think that number is probably a lot higher based on the report of parents as a home visitor over the last 20 or so years. So active and feisty kids are fussy. They have irregular feeding and sleep patterns. They're fearful of new people or situations, and they tend to be high-strung and have intense reactions. And then finally, we have the slow to warm or cautious children. These kids tend to be clingy, inactive, fussy, and withdraw or react to new situations. It sounds a lot like the feisty Todd, but a little bit different in the sense that they're just these really, really cautious kids who don't want to jump into new situations very easily. Now keep in mind that there are going to be a group of kids who really don't fit neatly into one of these temperament types, and that's okay, right? That is the uniqueness of being human, right? We don't fit into neat little boxes. The reason I share this information again regarding temperament is just to get you kind of thinking and trying to think as a parent about how your child responds to the world around them so that you can use that information to try to figure out ways to help them learn how to adapt and cope with the world. So, for example, children who really struggle with transitions, right? They're not going to respond well to us just kind of dropping everything and running out the door, especially if they were in the middle of an activity. So when it's possible, we want to think about, okay, what can I do to help prepare Joey for the fact that we're going to have to go someplace this afternoon? You know, those kids might need a visual, or you sit down at breakfast and talk about what's going to happen today. We're going to eat breakfast, and then we're going to play for a while, and then we're going to have lunch. Then we're going to get in the car, and we're going to go see so-and-so, and then we'll come back home and have dinner. So we really need to think about how can we prepare our children knowing how it is that they perceive the world. It can really make our lives a little bit easier and their lives a little bit easier. I also share this information because it is related to development and learning, right? Like I've learned over the last 20 years that temperament plays a big piece in toddler language development. You know, one approach for those happy social content kids may not work that well with those cautious kids or those feisty kids. So I think it's true as well when we look at our kids moving into academic environments, really being able to learn and understand how they learn best. So I'm hoping that you found this very brief discussion of temperament a little bit insightful. I'm hoping that you're walking away looking at maybe some of the the things that you see from your child that maybe frustrate you, right? Maybe you're frustrated that they struggle with transitions, or that they have irregular sleep patterns, or that they're really, really active during the day. I'm hoping that you look at those things more as a sense of that's just kind of how they're wired, and from the perspective of what can I do to help them through this and develop some coping skills or use that to their benefit. Now, there's a whole lot more to this puzzle. I'm going to be talking about next time communication styles, and that's kind of what I look at as a kind of an offshoot of these temperament that can have an impact on that speech and language development in particular, which I know a lot of you are here for. I'm also going to be talking about in the future our own parenting styles, as well as our own parenting communication styles, so that you can kind of look at how all of these things work together. So that wraps up our discussion for today. If you found this information helpful, please make sure to like and subscribe to my channel. Also, if you would like tidbits sent to your mailbox every single week, then please subscribe to my newsletter. You can click on the link on my page. All right, you guys, I'll see you next time.